Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. In today's video, I'm taking one transfer and making two projects out of it. So let's get started. So the transfer that I'm using is the largest Santa in the IOD holiday release Candy Cane Cottage. And several weeks ago, I was coming home from my daughter's house and I was thinking about this transfer and how large it is, and I just didn't want to just have one project out of it. So I was trying to think, how could I use it in the best way possible? And so the second project is how I'm going to use the bottom half of the transfer. So I'm excited for you to see that as well. Now, this is just an old wood cigar box that I actually had right many of them. So I got my husband to trim off those little ledges. I could have used the machine myself, but actually I was afraid that I'd cut my fingers off. So he helped me do it because he's better at using some of those power tools. And so I painted it all with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream. And for the background, this is just a piece of sheet music that I've had for quite some time. I thrifted a whole little booklet several years ago, and I've just kind of saved it, and I use it on different projects. And I actually dyed it with coffee a good while back. And then I go ahead and, dye all of it, and then I let it dry out. And then I just kind of put it back to be ready to use when I need it. Now I'm using Pentart Decoupage Varnish and glue to put it down. And I'm going to go ahead and put it all down, and then I'm going to be using a little piece of saran wrap to kind of pull out all the wrinkles, but I really didn't have that many. So I made sure that that paper was glued on, and I think I probably let it sit overnight because I wanted to make sure that when I put this transfer on, it wouldn't lift off because maybe it was just a little bit wet up underneath. And then I'm just using the transfer tool to rub it all on. And then once I get it all put on, then I'm just going to peel it back a little by little just to make sure that all of it gets transferred. And then what I'm going to do is just take a little piece of that plastic that it's on and just rub over it, and that's called burnishing it. Now, I did not seal that paper at all. I just kind of left it as is because when you do transfer on some surfaces, it's pretty easy, and paper is usually pretty easy. Now I'm taking some cornstarch and I'm putting it out on my silicone mat because I'm going to be taking some air dry clay and I'm going to be rolling it out, and I'm going to have just one long piece. And I'm using this technique because when my mom used to make biscuits all the time, she would put flour out on the counter so that the biscuit dough wouldn't stick. So it's the same concept, and I just kind of rolled it with the rolling pin, until I got it long enough. Now, this is just one of the little pieces of the stamp Winter Adornment. And I'm going to be stamping the same piece all over this long strip, but I'm going to be turning it one way and then another. And then I'm using that rolling pin to push that stamp down into the clay. Now, once I get it all finished, I do immediately go in the kitchen and wash it out because I don't want any of that clay or any of that cornstarch to get in my stamps and, be hard to get out later on. So, but I just go all over with this. And then it's not, like the size that it needs to be. So I kind of measure it on the box, and then I take it off, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and I'm just using a little cutter to cut it down to where it's about the size that it needs to be, and it's going to go on 3 sides of the box. And I'm just using this because it just cuts it really easy. But this is something that's sharp. And this is one of those little paddles that you use when you're putting wood filler on. But I use this one a lot for a lot of different things. It's big and it's wide. And sometimes if I need to kind of pick up something from the bottom that's wet, then I'll just actually use that. Now I'm using Titebond glue And I'm going to be putting it all over the 3 sides. And then I'm going to take that long piece of air dry clay that I stamped into, and I'm going to just put it on those 3 sides all around. And I have that cornstarch right there only because I need that little shadow box to be able to stand up. And then I'm just going to let it dry overnight because I just want to make sure it's good and set up. Especially because it's not just on one side, but it's on all 3 sides. And I didn't want to, make any of it accidentally come apart by playing with it too much. So I let it dry overnight. So I go in, once it's dried, with Rust-Oleum Chiffon Cream, which is the same color that I painted the other parts of the box with. And I'm just going to go all around and paint all of that air dry clay that I stamped with the winter adornment piece. Now, because it's already a little rustic, I wanted to add a little bit of detail to that trim, and I wanted it to stand out. So actually, this is just a little container, and I take 2 of the Dixie Belle Voodoo Gel Stains. One is Tobacco Road, and the other one is Natural, and I just mix those together, and then that way it's not quite so dark. Now, these molds right here were actually made last Christmas, and I made them with resin. And they came from the mold, the IOD mold called Boughs of Holly, which unfortunately is almost impossible to find these days. And I'm gluing it on with the Titebond Thick and Quick, and that's the blue label. And it's kind of barely hanging onto the edges, so I let it set up overnight to make sure it sets up real well. Now I'm going to make another mold for the other side, and this is a new stamp that I got. It's by Redesign with Prima, and it has a big sleigh on it, but it also has where you can mold the words Merry Christmas. And so if you've not used resin before, there's 2 parts, part A and part B. And you put part A in and it's clear, and then you put the equal part of the second bottle, and then you stir it really quick, and then make sure it's all clear, and then you pour it into your mold, and it sets up in about 10 minutes. So once they're good and dry, or molded up, then I take them out and I paint those with the Rust-Oleum Chiffon Cream. And once that dries, then I go back with my mixture of Voodoo Gel Stain, and I just put it on, and then I wipe it off because I really just need it to be in the crevices. Now, this particular mold, I believe I used Waverly Moss green paint, but it was still just a little bit too bright. So I take my mixture of the Voodoo Gel Stains, and I just put a little bit on it just to kind of darken it up, and it also pulls out the details on that greenery. Then what I do is I go ahead and I glue those 2 words onto the other side. And that was a little bit tricky because you had to get it in just the right spot. And because these molds are hanging off the edges, then I make sure that the back of them is painted once they dry, so that you can see from the back. Now, this is a new product that I just got, and it's called Chameleon Varnish. And it's made by Pentart, and it just kind of gives just a touch of glimmer to it. And my mom suggested this. She said because, sometimes when you see greenery, sometimes when the sun hits it in just the right way, it'll kind of glisten. So this is just a really light touch to it, and it gives just a little bit of extra shimmer to it. But it definitely is not prominent when it comes to this piece. And here's the final project. I love it. I just think he's so sweet. And I just really like that I was able to use one transfer to make 2 projects. And I'm excited for you to see the next thing. Now, you can see the trim that I stamped into. And it really wasn't necessary, But I wanted to also inspire you to let you know that you can stamp into air dry clay. And just make sure that when you stamp it on, then you roll over it with a rolling pin. And that pushes the stamp into the air dry clay. So if you're liking the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and become part of our family. We would love to have you. All right, here's the other part of the transfer. This is the idea that I came up with. Now, this is just a board that was out in the wood shop. And my husband, he just kind of comes upon this wood out on the construction site, and he'll, if it's just pieces here and there, but he'll always ask the foreman if he can have it. So we're always getting little scraps of wood. And so I take it and cut it just the size that I need, and then I'm just putting the Dixie Belle Voodoo Gel Stain straight on it, and then I wipe it back off. Now I'm going to be using the Portobello Road stamp. That's the brick stamp. Now, because my husband's a brick mason, I know that it's when you're laying brick or if you're laying tile, you never start on the edges and then work your way forward. You want to start in the middle and then stamp out on either end. And so what you do with this particular stamp is the piece will fit right up to the edge of the other one. And then on the other side of that board, that's when you use the other part of that stamp. So they all just kind of fit together really well. And now one of the things that I noticed is I needed to have it right up close to that stamp, because the first time I stamped it, it was just a little teeny bit off. Okay, so here's Santa's feet. And you'll see in just a minute what I'm going to do with his feet. Now, I'm having to cut off a little bit extra of this transfer, which I really kind of just pained me to have to cut it off, because you never want to, not use everything that you've got. But this was all I needed. So I'm measuring it off because I'm going to be painting a black square on this. And what I'm simulating is a brick fireplace. And so I can't wait for you to see how I use the feet in just a minute. Now, I just use some Waverly's ink black paint, and I just have measured it off, and I think I used even like a little pencil to make sure that it was even. Now, one of the things that I'm kind of messed up on was I wanted to put a little bit of that coat trim on, and then I didn't like it. So once I put those boots on, and then I had that other part showing, then I didn't like it. I only wanted the boots to show. So it's okay. I just took some black paint and I painted over that transfer. And then you didn't know that it was there. And then with this, before I put either one of the transfers on, I did put a clear sealer on it because I wanted to make sure that the transfer went on really well. Now, the fireplace was just a little bit plain, so these are some molds that I had already made up, and I made them with hot glue, and I'm just going to put a trim around the fireplace. So I measure it all off, and then I'm going to paint it. And I'm going to paint all three pieces with that same black before I add it to my piece. Now, one of the things that I forgot to film was the mantle that I glued onto that piece of wood. And I'm lucky enough to where I've got some barnwood now, and I don't like to throw any little pieces away. So this actually was just like a little long skinny piece, but I didn't want to throw it away, so I've kind of been hanging on to it, and I thought it would make a perfect mantle. And so all I did was I measured it off, and then I glued it on and just let it set up. And what I'm doing right now is I've got a toothpick in my hand, and sometimes when you're trying to paint a mold, if you don't want to have paint all over your hands, I'll just take a little toothpick and I'll kind of hold that mold down, and then I'll paint it. And then that way I don't get quite as much paint on my hands as I would if I was trying to, kind of hold on to that mold. Now, these are some little candlestick molds, and I'll make sure to link it in the description box. But it's a mold that's made by Redesign with Prima, and it's got little pieces of a chandelier on it, and it's got different light fixtures, and they also had these little candlesticks. And I had already made these up with resin, and I just had them in my stash. And the candlesticks, one is larger, and then one's just a little bit smaller. Now, I painted them all black, but you'll see at the end I changed it up because once I added them to the mantle, I didn't like it. I thought that it just kind of blended too much into the mantle or on the fireplace, and I didn't think you could see it well enough. And then I tried putting some gold gilding wax on it, and I didn't like that either. So, in just a minute, you'll see that what I did was I went back and I just painted them with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream. And one of the things I forgot to film was this is just a piece of greenery that I got at the Dollar Tree. And I just kind of glued it on in 3 different spots on either end. And then I made it so that it kind of swooped down. And that was just a little wreath that I found at Hobby Lobby. Now, this is something that I made with resin, and it's just one of those bakery molds. And it's just a little frame, and I paint it with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream because I'm also going to be using this on the mantle. So I had everything put on it, and I took it over to my mom's because I wasn't happy with those candlesticks. So she was the one that I suggested that I go back and paint the candlesticks this same color. Now, if you've watched my channel, you know that I love gold gilding wax, so I had to make sure I put some of that on it. So you can see the black candlesticks that I've added to the mantle, but I don't like them. Oh, and on this little wreath that's on the fireplace, I had like that little bow that came on something else. I pulled it off and I glued it onto this little wreath. And the only reason I put the wreath on it was because the top part of the boot wasn't all the way at the top of the fireplace. So I kind of need to hide that. Now, look at that little deer head. That was actually an ornament. And I didn't film myself doing it because, well, it's kind of weird because I just kind of broke his head off because I wanted to have like a deer mounted on the fireplace. So I thought, that might look kind of weird doing that on films, but I just kind of broke his head off, and then I glued him on the inside of that frame. Now, I've painted the candlesticks with the Rust-Oleum chiffon cream, and then I painted the little trim with a Rust-Oleum red color. I'm not sure which one it was, what the color was. And here's the final piece. What do you think? I just love it. I think it's so neat. And so I thought about putting like a little sign that was right beside it that said, I'm stuck. Santa coming down the chimney. But I thought, that might be just a little bit too tacky. But that's kind of what it reminded me of. And that was what I was thinking about when I was coming home from my daughters one night is like, oh, I can just make like a little fireplace and have his feet coming down the fireplace. So here's all the 2 pieces that I made. So in the comments below, tell me which one was your favorite. And would you take a large transfer and make 2 different projects out of it? But it was a lot of fun to make this video. It's kind of been a process to make it because, it's one of those things where you do a little bit and then you need to figure it out some more and then you wait. So this has kind of been waiting in the wings for me to do this video. So if you enjoyed the video today, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel and make sure to share it out with your neighbors. Thank you so much for all your support, and I'll see you soon, friends.